Marinochka, Valentina Semyonovna spoke the words heavily, with shortness of breath. Please come to the store. We forgot to buy sausages for the table. This sausage has completely slipped my mind, and Lyonya likes so much. Marina wrinkled her nose. Tomorrow is Saturday. Valentina Semyonovna gathers relatives for her birthday. Again, we'll have to sit at the table instead of going for a walk with Borka. The guests will endlessly eat and discuss something, and Marina and her mother-in-law, Valentina Semyonovna, carry plates, heat, fry, cut, wash, and listen. Valechka was the youngest of 3 children. Her mother, who once came from a flooded village to Moscow, slowly settled in the city. At first the woman served someone as a servant, then moved to the bakery, then somewhere else. Valina's sisters traveled to other cities, but they never lost touch with each other. They called and wrote, came to visit, and sent weighty parcels by mail. Some things, some books, some treats. Boris, Valentina Semyonovna's son, was accustomed to the fact that in the evenings the telephone trills every now and then, forcing his mother to go out into the corridor, sit on a stool, and resting from her cares, leisurely discuss everything that had accumulated in her large family over the week, day, or even just a few hours that the relatives had lived away from each other. Marina did not understand it. It seemed to her that all these give-and-take idle talk, sighs and exclamations, which mother-in-law inserted into their conversations, only distracts, that people just have nothing to do. Here they are pouring from empty to empty, discussing their boring, monotonous lives. Marina was scheduled every minute, then work, then to the store or to the hairdresser, or the pool. Borya recently gave her a subscription to the gym. She, however, really wanted to go with him together, to somehow spend time outside the house next to her husband, and with the benefit. But Boris or did not consider it necessary, or just did not have enough money, or else why? But in the end, Marina had to go alone. At first it was somehow uncomfortable. Then the woman grew acquaintances, connections. They were favorite and not very trainers, carved out time in a busy schedule for sauna and aqua aerobics, only without her husband. Well then, so be it. Unlike her mother-in-law, Marina rarely called. Mother is not particularly interested in the life of her daughter. Brother, who was older by 9 years, somehow long ago distanced, lived his own concerns, and other people's problems to take on themselves, did not want to take. Her friends wrote short messages, and there was nothing much to discuss. Valentina Semyonovna, on the other hand, hung by the telephone for hours. Her head, the weather, weekend plans, everything was thoroughly discussed with each sister, and sometimes even with their husbands. Marinka only rolled her eyes, saying what nonsense people talk about. No one ever talked to her about such things, much less Boris. My mother-in-law's birthday was in the summer. Depending on the weather, Valechka gathered her relatives either in her apartment on Obolensky Lane, where the windows overlooked the estate of Ellen Tolstoy. Tolstoy, where in the evenings you could sometimes hear the military orchestra rehearsing at the military institute, where fireworks were going off, ending someone's holidays, where Moscow was boiling with its crowded, multi-voiced life, and Valya would stand at the window and look out for her sisters when they would finally pass through the yard, and, as usual, raise their eyes to her windows, see a familiar silhouette, wave and hurry into the entrance. But most often Valentina Semyonovna called everyone to her dacha. Her son Borenka had arranged everything there according to the latest requirements for convenience and the illusion of city life. A little trimmed the old, beaten from thick boards. The house added a nice kitchenette with a large porch, in the shadow of the pine tree that grew here since ancient times. Built a gazebo, Marina bought a garland that, as if fireflies, lit up the cozy canopy in the evenings. This is where Valya liked to go himself and call his relatives. This year the summer was hot, stuffy. It was decided to meet at the dacha. Valya and her husband, Rodion, lived in the cottage since May, set up life as usual, planted a few beds with greens. Now, on the eve of the big holiday, they went to the fair, in the neighboring village. Valya put the chicken baked, Rodion marinated kebabs, because the guests, as usual, will stay for several days. It is necessary to please everyone. Bore. Maybe we shouldn't go. Marina looked at her husband. Well, all these aunts again with their conversations. Maybe without us, eh? Why didn't they please you? Boris for a moment raised his eyes from the book, which lay a little away from the cup of coffee, and a plate of pies, which Marina baked while waiting for her husband from work. Aunt Sveta and Aunt Olga were very nice people, and their husbands, God willing, as they say. Borja knew his mother's sisters from childhood, sometimes visited them for several days. They often came to the boy, spoiled him with gifts. The aunts had no children of their own, so they gave all their unspoken, unborn maternal love to their nephew. But they also scolded, brought up, often much harsher than the soft and gentle Valentina. I'm bored with them, Marina sighed. They have their own topics, memories. You go to your room, and I have to sit and listen. What? Borja looked at his wife with a completely confused face. He felt that she said something important. It is necessary to answer. But the book was so interesting, and the pies tasty, and more in the peace of this hour before the trip on a busy highway, somehow nothing and did not fit. The woman sighed and began to collect in her bag the products that she had asked her mother-in-law to bring. We left by evening. There were a lot of cars on the road. Borja carefully, like an excellent driver from the driving course, looked ahead. Marina was reading a book. Earlier, when she was still dating Boris, they talked a lot on the road, listening to music. Then somehow it all went to no. Whether her husband grew out of these frivolous conversations, or Marina herself became too nerdy and down to earth. Yes, and discuss it seemed to be, and nothing to discuss. All long ago agreed. Conversation in the cabin of a moving car flashed with a false, ghostly light. If suddenly there was an unusual car ahead or a store that they forgot to go to, if Valia called and wondered when the guys would arrive, or if there were messages about an impending thunderstorm. But even then, a couple of words, minutes, glances were enough to come to a common decision, or to recognize that the topic was not worth discussing. What are you reading? Suddenly asked Boris, noticing how his wife furtively wiped away a tear. Pride and Prejudice. You saw the movie. So what? I don't know why we have to go over this again when you already know how it ends. So what? Okay, don't distract me. It's a difficult moment. Marina just wanted to open her mouth to pull her husband, but immediately squeezed into the seat, because in front of their car rushed a truck, almost hitting the hood. No! How could it not? Boris slapped his hand on the horn. Who gives them the license? Marina could not answer. The question was rhetorical. The high-rise buildings outside the window were replaced by fields with ospreys racing with the car, hunting for lizards, with woods that now ring with mosquitoes' squeaks, dark spruce forests, where the whole ground is so thickly covered with needles that not a single blade of grass can make its way to the light and spread its leaves in the cool darkness. The lupines are blooming. How beautiful! Marina wanted to take a picture of the view outside the window, but did not have time. Don't push it, please. I'm sorry, I cannot weave like a turtle, shrugged Borja. They arrived at the dacha in the dark. Valentina Semyonovna waited at the gate, then came out to meet them. Rodion Ilyich helped unload the bags. How was the trip? Tired? I can see you're tired. Come to dinner. Valia was glad that the children, and she called them that, despite the fact that Borka was already 43, had finally arrived, that they could sit on the veranda and drink tea with mint. Thank you, Mammy. Borja kissed his mother on the cheek and went to change his clothes. Hello, Marish. Why are you so sad? Nothing, I'm fine. I'm just tired. Okay, come quickly to our table. Valentina Semyonovna touched her sister-in-law's shoulder. She nodded and hurried into the house. For how many years Marina has been married to Borja, and still Valentina Semyonovna cannot find an approach to her. All something as if between them stands between them, as if Marina does not let her near, defending herself from unknown. Marina met her future husband in some social networks, Then the young people met for a long time. Borya proposed only after 2 years of acquaintance. The newlyweds took Boris's room. Valya and Rodion Ilyich did not object, although sometimes it was embarrassing, ruined the established life of the former family. But over time, the rough edges smoothed out. Valentina thought that everything was fine. And then Marina got pregnant, became irritable. Borja was also nervous, because the doctors gave very contradictory prognoses. "You'll see, everything will work out," persuaded Valentina Marisha, who sat in tears in the kitchen. Another examination, another frightening suspicions. "They told you, and you believe everything, and they themselves do not know anything for sure." Marina agreed. But the doctors were right. The baby was never born. The woman did not want to try again. So, and remained Boris's family to live as a couple, without worries about kindergarten and school, without arguments about how to treat a broken knee and whether to do vaccinations now or let him grow up. No, the guys loved each other. Love grew with them, but with its growth lost its former ardor, and another round for the application of their bright feelings in Marina was not. Here and bewailed her, as Valya thought, from the lack of someone who can still love. The first morning rolled Aunt Sveta. Marina, she a little annoyed her fussiness. Too loud voice and a lot of things that woman wanted to do at once in one moment. Just after entering Valentina's garden through the gate and hugging her sister, Svetlana was already saying something about apple trees, about stunted lettuce bushes, about how she could help make the Alpine hill. Aunt Sveta's husband, Leonid Petrovich, followed quietly, nodding quickly to Rodion, Marina and Bora, who also came out to greet the guests. If Svetlana didn't speak, she did, quickly, briskly and clearly. Whether she needed help cooking or hanging laundry on ropes, cleaning the house or slicing apples for drying, the vivacious woman had everything in her hands. And if there was nothing to do, Sveta would roll her bicycle out of the shed, call her husband, and together they would go to the lake. "I sometimes think that if Aunt Sveta stops or is silent, she will immediately petrify," Borja joked. "She is as if afraid," replied Marina. "What?" "Well, to stop, silence or calm, as if purposely fills her life with bustle, so that you do not have time to look around," shrugged Marisha. "Nonsense. She's always been like that as long as I've known her. Such a temperament, probably," shook his head Borja. "And what did she find in Leonid Petrovich? A silent man, and she needs to communicate." "She doesn't need it. Aunt Sveta even sometimes gets annoyed when someone speaks instead of her. And Uncle Lenya is very silent. Just what she wanted." "Yes," stretched Marina. "But only whether he wanted it." "Marina Valyusha, come and see what seeds I've brought you. We'll have time to plant more. And then, I see, you completely sad." Marina wrinkled her nose. Olga and her husband arrived at lunchtime. Marina liked Olga best of all Valentina's family. Stately, some solemn, able to beautifully present herself. She liked stylish things, dressed well, was in no hurry, and was like an aristocrat. "And here is the heroine of your novels," Boris joked. "Only a little older. Borya." Valentina pulled her son and hurried along the path to the gate to meet her sister. "Happy birthday, dear." Olga presented her sister with a bouquet of roses and some gift in a beautiful purse. "Sorry, we hurried as much as we could." "Come in, Olyushka. Will you have some tea?" "Yes, if it's possible." Everyone knew Aunt Olya's old habit of drinking tea with a spoonful of honey. "How nice." Olga took a deep breath and smiled. "You're a clever girl. You keep such a garden in order. Where's Sveta?" They left on bicycles with Lenechka to the lake. Marina pressed her lips. "Leonechka, you're already under 70 probably, and still riding extreme," she thought. Borya would never be so silent, unquestioningly follow his wife. And Marina sometimes wanted to try how it to be a queen and sole ruler in his family state. "Bor, let's go to the lake. Walk." Marina looked expectantly at her husband. "Go, of course." Valentina Semyonovna looked out of the window and nodded approvingly. It's nice there now, but they say it's still cold to swim. Boris quickly looked at his mother, at Marina, and nodded doomfully. Okay, but not for long. Why? His wife took him by the hand and they headed for the gate. We began to walk together very rarely. Do you remember when we went to the sanatorium? You invited me to go boating and then gave me a bouquet of lilacs? I remember. And then paid a fine for those lilacs. The man involuntarily smiled. The food there was bad. Not bad, but dietary. Oh, look, ducks! Marina stopped on the shore and began to poke her hand in the grey-brown lumps, clinging to the mother duck at the water's edge. The woman looked at her husband, waiting for his answer, but he had already taken out his phone from his pocket and was reading something. He'd been reading a lot lately. Too much. You're not interested? Marin, I stopped marveling at chicks about 5 years ago. The couple walked around the lake in silence. Well, come on, suddenly said Marina, snatched her hand and quickly walked back to the house. What's wrong again? All right, honey. Everything is so. You're all right. She said something else, then turned and ran away. Boris looked around confused and met his eyes with Aunt Sveta, who stopped her bike a little aside and watched the quarrel of young people. Well, there. Now he will tell his mother everything. Borja sighed doomedly and went home. Before dinner, his wife purposely avoided Borja, defiantly went to another corner if he approached. Such an incomprehensible game soon bored the man, and he went to his room. Downloaded recently a book about modern methods of insulation of houses brightly lit up on the screen in black letters, and Borja went with his head into science. In the evening everyone finally gathered around the table. There were toasts and laughter. Valentina, happy with this family coziness, which was concentrated under the four-pitched roof of the gazebo, blushed and looked lovingly at everyone who was with her today. Boris was sitting here next to Marina, but it was as if he didn't even notice her. He looked after his aunts, helped his mother, told her something. And his wife seemed that she suddenly disappeared. Go away. Vaporize. He and Will not pay attention. He had gotten used to it. His eyes were too washed out, they had been together too long. There was tea and cake, there were guitar songs and sparklers. And then everyone somehow scattered, rejoicing in the warmth of the summer night. Borja, saying he was busy, went to his room. Aunt Sveta and her husband went for a walk along the gardening alleys. Valentina Semyonovna was talking to someone on the telephone while Rodion was washing the dishes. Music sounded softly from the house. Rodion liked to listen to the classics, saying that only in such music did he see meaning and inspiration. Only Marina remained in the gazebo. The lights of the garland flickered gently in the thickets of grapes. Moths flew up to the lampshade every now and then and tugged diligently at the glowing lamp. Marina watched Olga and her husband Yuri sitting in rocking chairs outside the house. She kept waiting for Olga to say something, for her husband to answer her. A conversation would begin, they would laugh or just talk quietly about nothing. But both only sighed. Then Yura got up and went into the house. Olya met Marina's eyes and waved her hand, inviting her to sit together. Are you alone? Where is Borenka? Aunt Olga looked around. In his room. He said he had to work. Ah. Well, let him work. Look at the clouds, Marish. It's just charming. Sugar lambs of clouds went to the horizon, changing their color from caramel yellow to bright pink, like strawberry. And at the edges, where the sunlight no longer reached, blueberry paths from airplanes dotted the sky into even stripes. Yes. Marina suddenly looked carefully at the guest. Aunt Olga, I've been watching you and Uncle Yura. Yes, and? You didn't say a word to each other while you were sitting here like that. Not one word. Do you really like not saying a word? Borja doesn't talk to me much either. He doesn't say a word, that's all. Olga tilted her head, thinking how to answer the question. You know, she began at last, there are different kinds of silence. It can be so disturbing, as if it were about to burst into a thunderstorm. There is nothing cozy in such silence. It only makes you angry and anxious. There are other times. One wants to say so much, to discuss, and the other is tired. Perhaps the interlocutor is too intrusive, too abused someone else's attention, or says something that is impossible to deal with right now. Then it's bad too. And Yurochka and I have a kind of silence in unison. I don't need anything from him. Well, except just to be around him. He needs me too. Everything's been said. The arguments are over. We've outgrown it. I'm fine as I am. How so? It's hard for me that Borya doesn't discuss anything with me, doesn't listen to me. He sits and reads books. Olga thought for a moment. Well, he's not a girlfriend. What can he discuss with you? Are there really so many such topics? He's known everything for a long time. He's been like that since he was a kid. I remember he never asked me to play or read, never distracted me, never bothered me for nothing. All he ever wanted was for me or his mom to be there for him. Just close by, at arm's length, so to speak. Nothing else. No. Sometimes I feel like Bora doesn't need me. Number. The important thing is that dinner is on the schedule. You shouldn't say that. I was watching you guys today too. He was sitting at the table. He seemed to be in his own thoughts. And when you get up and go to the kitchen, he suddenly starts looking for you. You come back, and he's not here again. That's worth a lot. Ouchly, Marina grinned. I can be quiet and without him. I need another. Another? Please. Why are you sitting? You think Leonid was always like this, riding a bicycle, walking in dark alleys? When Sveta met him, he was a completely different person. But Aunt Sveta is not an ordinary woman. She needs to be won over. So he's trying. But initially Sveta made all her demands clear to him, so that there were no misunderstandings. He's a submissive? Marina asked it quietly, almost a whisper. No, he just loves her, and she taught him how to express it. You expect so much from Boris, and he is not a telepath. Tell him I want you to talk to me for an hour a day. Believe me, he'll get into it. But you have to talk about him too. And then, when you are satiated with each other, you'll learn to be silent together. And that will be joyful too. Olga slowly got up, and wishing Marina good night's sleep, went into the house. The woman was left alone, made herself comfortable in the armchair and closed her eyes. Candles were burning out on the table. The lake was cool. Somewhere in the forest, Cuckoo counted down the years of happiness for Marina and her family. 19, 20, said Marina in a whisper. 21, heard her voice behind her back. Borya sat down next to him and put in front of his wife a cup of hot cocoa. She smiled. I'll sit with you, may I? He said quietly, guiltily. With me or the phone? Suspiciously looked at the pockets of the husband's jacket. Marina. And you have not grown out of the evening sit-downs yet, huh? The phone stayed in the house. I have not grown. Well then, okay, somewhat surprised wife replied. It'll be a pleasure. Talk to me, eh? Boris sat down next to him. On Marina's lap lay a branch of jasmine with large, as if made of vanilla cream, fragrant flowers. Mother will kill you, smiled at the woman, inhaling the familiar smell from childhood. One branch more, one branch less, and they talked until the mosquitoes chased the couple home. It was very unusual, even seemed like a fairy tale. Marina was very afraid that everything would suddenly end, burst like a soap bubble, hanging ugly drops of disappointment. But no, the conversation flowed and flowed. Boris leaned back in his chair, and taking in his hand the palm of his wife, drove her finger, as once long ago, back in the years of their acquaintance. And Marina does not need to know that, wishing her good night's sleep, Aunt Olga came then to her nephew. They had a very serious conversation, Borya even scolded, and he, as in childhood, crumpled the edge of the tablecloth and averted his eyes. Well, what have they got there? Valya quietly approached Ola in the morning. It seems to be getting better. It's a pity they lost so much time, the silent ones. Olya shook her head. They'll make up for it. Cuckoo gave them a lot of years yesterday. Valentina nodded confidently. Many years passed. The old couple sat on the porch, covered with plaids. The garlands in the tangles of grape stalks were still shimmering. The clouds were still fluffy watercolor blotches spreading across the sky. The man and the woman were silent, silent about the most important things, silent together, in unison. Valentina, Olga and Svetlana were gone. But there were Boris and Marina. They were together because, even after they had satiated themselves with each other, they had learned to be silent together, enjoying the mere existence of their beloved.